the Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm Steven Zakash here with my co-host, Tulio Siragusa, and we've got a special guest who we'll introduce in a moment. So, a product may be brilliant, but if its message is confusing, buyers will hesitate. If the story is unclear, sales teams improvise, and if the team is misaligned, the market feels that confusion. And this is especially true in those technical markets where companies can build powerful products that are difficult for customers to understand. And so we're going to dive into how EQ, emotional intelligence, plays a role in all this, especially in those technical markets. And Tulio, introduce our guest today.
My pleasure. Our guest today is Josh Porter. He's the founder of Thunderwolf Consulting. Josh brings 20 years of go-to-market experience across enterprise software and high-growth startups, with nearly a decade focused on AI and developer tools. He has led product marketing and growth at Google Cloud and multiple AI scale-ups. Through Thunderwolf Consulting, Josh helps AI and developer-tooled companies clarify positioning, sharpen product narratives, and build go-to-market strategies that accelerate adoption, shorten sales cycles, and turn technical products into categories customers can understand. Thunderwolf's work includes marketing strategy, fractional CMO leadership, narrative strategy, messaging frameworks, customer journey mapping, campaign planning, KPI management, and systems that help marketing become a reliable asset to the company. Josh, welcome to the Bliss Business Podcast.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So Josh, in your world where, product marketing, go-to-market strategy, where do you think emotional intelligence shows up most clearly?
So it's so easy to create content as a marketer, just using AI, give it, 10 words to create this, that, or the other. And that's very efficient, but not necessarily effective. So the ability to take some of that information and use it in your own experience, use stories, use your own pattern recognition, and events that have happened in your past really help, or your company's past, depending on who you're marketing for, whether it's for yourself or as a small business owner or a company. Having that particular understanding of what are not just the logic behind, yes, does this argument make sense? Is it really, am I really showing, yes, you should use my product in a credible way, but then also you're doing it in an emotional way? Because you can always give facts and figures that can convince somebody using their kind of their logic, but what's really going to help people understand and remember something about you or your brand is something that connects with them emotionally. And that usually can be through a story, through some humor, or other means. By being able to understand that's the emotional intelligence that I think is important in marketing, but also as you work within a company.
For thousands of years, we've had that sort of storytelling, right? Where we didn't have AI telling us, can you imagine telling an AI story like a couple thousand years ago around the the campfire, right? No one's going to remember that, right? That's kind of the thing is there's no, I can't even imagine like that scene of just people around this campfire trying to regurgitate something that like AI has right now, where it just, there's no emotional hooks there. There's no humanity to it. It seems like, and so I think that's really kind of that emotional intelligence, really does come into play, is, feeling out what the meaning of a story is and being able to tell that and build a picture in people's minds, and then suddenly they get it, right?
I mean, yeah, they had the chat GPT back then too, Stephen. It was the Grand Poobah chief that you would ask around the circle. That was so we went stories. So now listen, Josh, I mean, you work with AI and developer tool companies, and these are very product, technically deep product type companies. And I spent 3 decades in technology companies, and the most difficult thing sometimes is telling engineers that nobody cares all the stuff. They just care about themselves, not what you can do. And so why do technically strong companies often struggle to explain what they do in a way that buyers actually understand from what matters to them?
Because they don't start with the pain the customer's experiencing. It's really easy to start with, oh, I built this, I built that, I made these features. And of course, that's what you spend day in and day out doing. But if you're trying to do that for the benefit of somebody else and understanding why they would need your product, that's a different line of thinking. Because when you're thinking about all your features that you've created, that's great. And they might be whiz bang. It might be awesome. Whether that's something in AI for customer experience or creating a model that helps with financial calculations. But if you're not showing how this solves a problem or a pain for a customer, they don't care how big your context window is. It doesn't really matter how many parameters the model has. It's about showing at a specific example about a pain that they're experiencing that you can solve for them. And it just so happens that your product can do it. And it just so happens the AI can do it. That's great. If it could be magic that does it, that's great too. Whatever the methodology is, that's great. But in the end, most of the time, the customer doesn't care how it gets done. They just care that it does.
So your site says, the Thunderwolf site says, your product has teeth, your story doesn't. Explain to our listeners, I think that's what you're hitting on here, right? And explain to our listeners what you're meaning there, and kind of why does story matter so much, maybe especially in like those growth stage companies too.
Yeah. So for your ability to connect with customers, you have to, again, start with that pain. What is it that they're experiencing? So you make it about them. It's not about you. It's not about your technical prowess. It's about being able to talk to them and understand their stories and their issues. And if you're able to come to them and connect what their pain is, if their, customer satisfaction scores are really low because their chatbots aren't really working really well, or their contact center reps aren't able to connect with their customers in a seamless way, whatever that particular pain is, you need to tie your capabilities to that pain. So if you're able to help improve customer satisfaction by increasing self-service capabilities so that customers don't have to wait for an actual person, then you're able to solve that problem for you as a company, and then also the problem for the end customer. And so when you're able to tie the story in at that level of, we see that you're having problems with managing your customers, let's come in and help you with that. And we can show you how, by the way, AI is helping us to do this, to help automate some of these processes. And so you have that story to be able to explain to them, instead of just coming in straight, well, we can automate 10 million conversations a day, or we can help deflect, several thousand customers per hour. The stories that connect with their pain are the way that you get their attention, because they ultimately have specific issues they want to solve for. And if you can help them solve that and reduce the friction or reduce the pain, then that's what they're looking for. And a story is the easiest way for them to connect with it, because they can relate to it, because maybe you're bringing up a story that a similar customers already experienced with them. So they can see themselves in that story using your product. So that's what I mean by, if your product is super capable, that's great. But if your story doesn't have the teeth or doesn't have traction, then the prospects might just overlook it.
A lot of times I think people get so close to their product and, that what they want to say, they have trouble telling that story. How can leaders tell when like the messaging is confusing? Is there any kind of telltale signs or any advice you'd give?
Oh yeah. If you go, I like to go in and do a survey of customers, internal survey about narrative alignment. And you find a lot there. Typically on something like that, you'll find, they think internally like, oh, we're, 100% aligned or 90% aligned. But on average, I think you'll find probably something more closer to like 30%. Your sales reps are telling multiple different stories. Your marketing has different messaging than what your sales team's using. And then your presenters at conferences probably are using a different type of story. So when you see that chaos of communication as a customer, it's clear, because if you're thinking about a company and you see at this event, they said A, but the salesperson told me B, and their website says C, it's pretty easy to spot. Then you lose confidence in the customer, in that company that you're thinking about. So I think as a customer, it's pretty easy to spot when the narrative isn't aligned. So that's why it's important to make sure that it is. And that takes a lot of internal work. That takes sales enablement. That takes marketing enablement. And so when you're able to get that alignment, first by recognizing that it isn't there and not having a delusion that it is, and then trying to fix that by using a central marketing or messaging framework, then that helps you create that alignment.
Now we're clear on the impact that has on customer. It creates confusion. It doesn't really build trust when you have that consistency. Well, what kind of emotional toil or impact does it have inside the company when you have that kind of disconnection or misalignment?
Well, there's lots of friction and frustration when the CEO is saying one thing and then he or she doesn't see their salespeople saying the same thing, repeating that message. And it's not to say maybe the CEO doesn't have the right message, maybe the salespeople do, or vice versa. But when you see that misalignment internally as a leader, then that's where it's like, all right, well, we need some more training, we need some better understanding. Or sometimes the sales team is a lot closer to the customer, and so it turns out maybe their messaging is a little bit better. So then it's a matter of educating the leadership on, this is what we say day in and day out, and this is what seems to work. So let's try to be aligned on that. Obviously that's easier said than done, but sometimes that's the case. And that obviously takes a little bit of humility. And it also goes with marketing. So marketing needs to also be aligned. In a lot of cases, marketing is developing the messaging, or sales enablement, a close cousin to marketing. And so having that alignment there as well. Anytime you have multiple people on something, you're going to have multiple opinions. But it's important to be able to understand what that message is, have a foundational document that's the source for, and then align with that. And sometimes you may not agree with it, but being able to work internally and align on something that everybody's using helps things move a lot more smoothly internally.
I think you said something very key. Humility plays a big role in this. And the CMO should definitely not be the yes person that you hire. They should be the person who's going to challenge you the most, because that's what's going to keep the brand honest and on point. And that requires humility to be able to not just push what you think works. And are you seeing that? How do you manage through that? Because that sometimes happens. Like, you got a CEO who's stuck in like, I've been doing this for 40 years. I know exactly what's going to land. And you're like, but that's not what's actually landing. How do you work through that?
Yeah, I've had to do that. It's really interesting scenario, but you kind of have to approach it yourself and with the form of humility and just say, but also authority. You say, I hear what you're saying. However, this is what I've actually tested with customers recently. This is what I've seen over the period of doing this particular function over many years. And this is what I've observed in the industry. And so you lay those 3 facts or whatever it is that you have as your arsenal and say, I'm just going to have to disagree. I think that this will work better. I've tested it. It seems like this will be a more optimal route than maybe the one you're suggesting. And then in the end, they're the decision maker. It's up to them. You just provide your recommendations. You don't back down and just be, as to your point, a yes man or yes woman. You got to have an opinion. But there does come a point where you have to disagree and commit. But also, if you don't have an opinion, then it's like, well, why are you there? And so having that opinion, especially when it's probably in disagreement with leadership, I think is key. And then you just kind of think about, well, what's the limit to that? Like, maybe I need to share my opinion with data and then maybe do it twice. And then if there's still no alignment, then that's the call of the leadership, not you did your part.
Yeah.
So Josh, one of the things we like to talk on the show are about like systems, and really kind of systems of care, systems of kindness, systems of love in business. And so when you're trying to get these teams aligned, you're trying to reduce confusion maybe, and serve customers and all that. Are there systems that can help companies turn kind of emotional intelligence, like we're talking about, into clear, more effective marketing? Any suggestions there? Any systems, processes that you recommend?
So in terms of connecting with the customers?
Yeah.
So I, as you see here in my amazing background, have a book that I just recently published for my clients. It's called The Last Human Marketer. It's a business parable. It's a way to, very much in the line of the goal, or maybe the alchemist, or the go-giver. So I have a framework in there that's called the Customer Connect Code. And that is a practical framework where you look at this lens of the customer and you start from there on how to talk about the story of your product. So there's 5 C's to this Customer Connect Code. So you start with customer, then the channels in which you would reach the customer. Then you look at the category which this customer is going to be looking at to help solve their problem. Then the competition within that category, and then your own capability. So those are the 5 C's of the Customer Connect Code. So that's how I advise startups to look at how their product is connecting with their customers. Because it's great, you can develop a product that has every feature out there to develop financial equations or help do reinforcement learning for song recommendations. But if you're not, again, able to connect that to the customer through that process, then the customer honestly doesn't care. And so that's how this particular framework, the Customer Connect Code, is able to show how to make the customer care and how to take their point of view on before just spouting out your features.
Is there one area of those 5 C's that you see like typically like just most often being completely failed?
The customer. It's all starts with the customer. So if you don't have them in mind, then the rest isn't going to work. Because if you don't understand the customer, then you understand the channels that they're working with. If you don't understand the channels, then you can't understand what category it is that they're looking to help solve their problem. And then if you don't understand the category, then you don't understand who the competition is. And then in the end, you might have an understanding of your capabilities, but it's not really about what the product is. It's about what the product does for the customer. And so again, the foundation really is the customer itself. And so sometimes I've seen products just built because somebody else built it, or the product can exist simply because it can. And if you don't have the customer's end goal in mind, their values and what pain they're trying to solve for, you easily can be dismissed. And a lot of companies will end up just not thinking about that. They won't have a true lock on who their ideal company profile is, or ideal customer profile is, who their key buyer personas are. And so you see that all the time, because you'll see some marketing pages marketing to everybody and not one particular person. And when you're marketing to everybody, you're marketing to no one.
I often think about this idea of the mousetrap, right? Everybody's always like, we've built a better mousetrap. But the mousetrap is just a tool, Is it going to help me get rid of more mice? Mm-hmm. My goal is not to get a better mousetrap. It's to get rid of the problem I'm having, So how does having a better one solve it? So, and this is something that I think it's important to ask. Thunderwolf's narrative strategy, you typically, your work includes aligning founders and leadership around the customer, product, and market narrative. We touched on this a little bit, what happens when there's misalignment. And then you map that narrative into a go-to-market motion, right? So why is it so important to get that alignment, the leadership alignment, before the company scales a campaign? Let's go a little deeper on that.
Sure, absolutely. Because if you don't have that alignment, then it kind of goes back to what we were talking about. Then you lose the trust of the customer. Because if they're hearing 5 different messages from 5 different parts of the company, then they don't know what you stand for. So having that go-to-market process of having alignment with the product team, the marketing team, the sales team are really key. And a big portion of my background has been in product marketing. And so when you're talking to sales, you can come up with the greatest messaging framework in the world, but if you just tell them, hey, you do a training on, hey, use this, they may or may not use it. But a better path to work on that is to not develop it in isolation. Work with the sales leadership to understand how to create the messaging framework. And then once that's developed, when you do the training, you either have the sales leaders do the training themselves, or stand up and introduce it and say, hey, we worked on this together with product marketing, and we're bought in. So we need all of you to be bought in as well. So that it doesn't become some marketing side project that's there to annoy the sales team. It's a way to show there's alignment across functions.
Thinking about the sales enablement process kind of there, what makes a good sales enablement? I mean, you kind of described it, a good sales enablement procedure for, is there some commonality? You kind of describing maybe like empathy. You kind of went through a little bit there. Are there some traits to like a really good system in that regards?
To be able to show empathy to the customer?
For your teams, yeah.
Oh, internal teams.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think some of these principles apply. You got to understand your team. As a leader of the team, you got to understand your team. You got to understand what are their needs, what are their particular pains. And maybe you're leading a sales team and they aren't hitting their numbers. Well, understanding them as a person, I think, is really the number one thing, no matter what function you're in or what kind of team you're leading. I think that really helps you connect so that you're more than just a employee. You're more than just a bot or cog in the machine, right? So I think that's number one piece. The second is understanding what are the exact issues that they're going through and being a coach to them. There's different models of being a manager. There's kind of a director manager, which is, you just do what I say. Boom. Sometimes that works. Sometimes it doesn't. I prefer the coaching manager style, where it's, all right, I'm invested in you. I'm going to show that so that you feel that. And then that way you're going to be a little bit more motivated to do what we've tried to align on. And also, it's not about just mandating goals and metrics. It's, again, kind of working together on working together on what those goals and metrics should be so that there's buy-in from them. And then you've got a little bit of a better relationship to ask them to do more, to do something differently. And so I think that's a really key thing. And then when feedback is necessary, because in most cases always will be, you got to do it in a way. I think the best way is to say, hey, I just want to let you know these are the things that we need to work on, but we're going to work on them together. And instead of just saying, I'm leaving you to the wolves and you got to do A, B, and C better, and it needs to be improved in 4 weeks. So I think those are some ways to show a little bit more emotional intelligence by connecting with them as well internally, so that you do have that alignment and that it's done in a way that's a little more human.
Yeah, I feel like that last example you described is the way that most people kind of feel it just coming at them all the time. We've got a audience question here. Let's pull that up. And it's from a LinkedIn user. What do you do when a founder insists on explaining how the technology works instead of why it matters?
I think that you can have both, but you've got to start with the why. You have to start, well, why is this thing even important to you? Why should this customer even listen to me in the first place? That's where the pain comes in. That's where, what is the job they're trying to solve in this particular case? And so you think about
Josh, my flux capacitor's meter.
Yeah, exactly. 2.5 gigawatts, I think so. So that's one of the best moves of all time, hands down. But yeah, it's so natural to want to talk about how the technology works, because that's what they're doing day in and day out, is building it. They're not necessarily thinking about your problem as a customer, which is why this typically happens. You start with those features. But if you can flip it around and say, sure, you can talk about how you got there. Let's talk about why first. And then that will spark a discussion of what the customer might be interested in.
Now let's talk about how AI is changing all this a little bit, Josh, because it's become a lot easier to write, to launch, to automate, and to imitate, right? So, and also speed things up, but that can also sometimes speed things up, very generic messaging that doesn't land. So how does emotional intelligence become even more important as AI becomes more commonplace in marketing and even in messaging or even in narrative development?
So it's funny you should bring that up. So the thing is if everybody's using the same 2 or 3 models for their messaging, then guess what? Everybody's outputs are basically going to look the same. So it's going to look very generic. So you're already coming in at a disadvantage by not having any differentiation. So because you're relying on the same source that most other people are. So that's already giving you a disadvantage. So that's nothing to say about emotional intelligence. That's just talking about differentiation. So that's one thing that I would like to point out. But when we're talking about emotions, again, you can get a good rough draft from AI. Maybe get you 80% there. That's fine. But you have to have some type of go beyond the logical piece and go to the emotional piece. I mean, it's kind of like the I forgot which Greek philosopher came up, but it's the kind of the three ways to be able to tell a story. There's I think it was I'm trying to remember his name. If it comes to me, I'll let you know. But it's
Plato?
logic. What's that?
Plato.
It probably was Plato. I'm pretty sure you can say Greek philosopher and you say Plato, then it's probably going to be right 90% of the time. But it's
Well, he was all about logic. When you said logic, that's what.
Yes. So there's logic, there's emotion, and then there's credibility, right? That's kind of the triple crown of being able to tell a story and to do it persuasively. So
I'm going to say it's Aristotle.
Oh, is it Aristotle? Okay, there we go. All right. I don't want to be getting
maybe it's Aristotle. And I was like, I better just be quiet.
So I'm glad I don't want to spread any fake news here. So okay, so it's Aristotle, but it's logic, emotion, and credibility. So you have to have that trifecta in order to be able to tell a story persuasively. And so when you're talking about your technology, you can, again, the logic piece is we built this platform by doing X, Y, and Z. Great, awesome. But then the emotion part is where, the credibility part is, we've done this. I've done, this for 20 customers or whatever, or I've had several other startups doing the same thing. That's an interesting way to show credibility. But that can all still lack emotion. The emotion is the key part where people are going to bring people in. So that's where you use a case study where somebody was some company was constantly drowning in their ability to serve their customers, but then you brought in your customer experience platform using AI, and that helped them avoid churn, and then kind of getting into the details of that. Showing the story of some pain that somebody else is already experiencing, that's where the emotion comes in.
We've got an audience question here.
Very timely.
So every tech company claims to use AI right now. How do you make your pitch stand out from the noise?
That's a good question. So there's a few things that's interesting. Yeah, everybody wants to say they're AI, but I look at AI in 4 different layers. You got the top layer, which is the application layer. So everybody uses some kind of application that has some type of AI infused it. Take Slack or Salesforce. They've got AI inside it, and there's already AI at that kind of application layer. But then you've got the platform layer. So the platform layer is mostly for, and the application layer is for business users. The next layer is platform, which is more for developers, technical audience. So they're developing these platforms in order for business users to use it. So you can look at smaller conversational AI companies that create their platforms so that developers at large banks or telcos can create their own customer experience using their platform. And then you have the next layer down is the model layer. So you're familiar with all the foundation model, a lot of the foundation model companies, OpenAI, Anthropic. And then at the very, very base layer is the infrastructure. So the chips, household name for that, of course, is NVIDIA. So those are the 4 layers of AI that I look at. And so they're the ones developing the AI for one of those particular layers. Now, if you're not in that, then you're developing something else, then I wouldn't necessarily consider you an AI company. But everybody, it's a trendy word. So they want to say, they want to seem like they're at the forefront. So there will be companies that have nothing to do with AI, but they've bolted it on for a few of their products, and they'll call themselves an AI company. I think for a founder or marketing team that wants to make their pitch stand out, that is to 1, understand those layers, 2, call that out specifically for the customer when they're trying to pitch, and then 3, connect their product to their particular pain. Again, it's not about being AI. For all intents and purposes, a lot of these customers it could be black magic for all they care. It's, how is this solving my problem? So as someone from the company pitching to a customer, they need to understand that customer first. It's not about being an expert in your particular product or your company. You got to understand that customer first and then connect their pain to your product. And that's how you can stand out.
Yeah, it's so true. Nobody cares what your product or they just care about, does it solve my problem? And I guess my question here on this is, because you can copy a lot. You can copy narrative, you can copy features, you can be a copycat so easily today with AI. But trust not easy to copy. Why is trust so important? And does storytelling play a role in building trust?
Yeah, so to the two questions, why is trust important? That's the foundation of how we do business, right? You got to be able to trust the transactions or the service that you're going to provide. We've all been scammed from something. In fact, it actually happened to me this morning. It's kind of crazy.
Oh, no.
That's a whole story in of itself. Yeah,
they're getting so good at the scamming stuff. It's wild.
Yeah.
We have a show just about that.
I was selling a pretty expensive device, and they gave me cash, and because I don't do any Venmos or Zelles for those types of things, but then when I go to the bank to deposit it, it was counterfeit. I was like, what?
Oh, man. Wow.
Yeah, crazy, right? I've never, to my knowledge, I've ever seen counterfeit cash. So yeah, kind of wild.
Wow.
So anyway, yeah. So that's why. So it's funny you should bring up trust. Trust is that there's like, and like, I tried to call the person. Of course, the phone was a burner phone. I tried to look them up on, the platform that I found them on. Not there anymore. So trust obviously is like, obviously I'm never going to do business with that person again. But that's obviously an extreme example. But then if you think about it at a higher level with with enterprise software, if you're not able to deliver on the objectives that they're looking for, then you're losing the trust, right? And just because you have this amazing product, if you're not filling their needs, then you're not going to gain that trust. Yeah. So I think that's the key thing. That's if you've already had them. If you're trying to get them, I think they want to be able to trust you, but they don't know how because they haven't used it before. That's where I think case studies and these stories are really key, because then you can show, and it's specifically ones that are related to the prospect in the same industry, because you can show that, hey, I've done it with your friend down the street. That will show them and help them have more trust in you. So I think that's really the key thing there. And I think the second question was what about trust? Remind me.
You can't copy that, and
yes.
I think you've answered both. You just,
okay.
It plays a role. Storytelling plays a role in that,
yes.
Building trust. You can't just copy that with AI.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, one of the questions we like to ask on this show is really around love in terms of, kindness, care, even trust is another example there. And we ask basically is, what role should love play in business?
It's interesting. That's not a topic that's really brought up a lot. It's kind of like this too gushy of a topic to bring up. But
we have built a whole show on that topic.
We're going. We're 200 plus guests have had to answer.
I love it.
Like, we're willing to go there, and so it's like, yeah, let's do it.
It's good. It reminds me of, there's this article I read about this car salesman. He was the top seller in the nation for this particular brand. And the interview was like, well, how did you become the number one seller? And he said, I love my customers. And they're like, what? It's like, I love my customers. So what does that mean? So it means paying attention to them. I think I had a manager one time who said it in a different way. Take an interest in the customer. And what does that look like? Asking about them, ask about their lives, ask about their career, ask about their personal lives, ask about what their problems are. Those are things that you may not call them love in the business setting, but that's an expression of it. And I really like that article about this salesman who used that principle to not only get the results he was looking for, but I'm sure it made it more enjoyable for both him and the customers he was interacting with.
You know, one of the great podcasts we had on here was with a car sales consultant who very much was like, love is so important to what we really should be doing in this business. Because, I mean, if you're thinking about just an awful experience, customer experience and all that, we all think of that sometimes, but he can back up all that with data and why this is such an important way to operate. And so I'm glad you brought up that specific example, because it's so true.
Yeah. One could say that telling stories is an expression of love. Taking the time to build a narrative to let someone connect to something real is an expression of love.
Well, it's ultimately you're trying to connect, right? I mean, that connection is really, that is a key part of it all.
Yeah. Josh, where can listeners learn more about you, Thunderwolf Consulting, your podcast? Tell us about your podcast and your work with AI.
Sure.
Companies.
Absolutely. So I consult with AI scale-up founders, 5 to 20 million in revenue, typically Series B or so. You can find me at thunderwolf.co. There you'll also see my podcast, as you mentioned, which is called Marketing Pack Leaders, where I interview marketing leaders in the AI space to talk about best practices, so the founders, for founders to listen and glean from. And then also you'll find on there my book that I mentioned earlier, which is another resource to help educate founders on ways to connect with their customers.
We got to get Steven on your podcast, talk about AI CMO.
Josh, thank you for joining us today. Great conversation. And to our listeners, thank you. Great questions. You know, when companies are combining that technical excellence with things like empathy, emotional intelligence, you know, that's how you kind of and create clarity. That's how you build that connection that we were talking about. That's how you really get that emotional connection. And it's just so essential. If you want that lifetime value in your customers, if you want to, you know, improve the bottom line, really focus on what we're talking about here today. A lot of ways, it just makes such a massive difference. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Bliss Business Podcast.